My name is Marta Quinn, and I never imagined that the coldest night of my life would arrive on my daughter's birthday. I was standing on the porch of her 2-story home in Maple Ridge, Ohio, holding a white envelope against my chest like it was something sacred. Inside was a personal check, $15,000, that I had saved from 25 years of night shifts at the ER. My hands trembled slightly from the winter air, or maybe from nerves. I told myself it was just the cold. The door opened before I could knock a second time. The light from the living room spilled across the porch, and there she was, Lena, my only child, wearing a soft blue dress I'd never seen before. For a moment, I thought she was about to hug me, but her face froze when she realized I had actually come. "Mama," she whispered, her eyes darting behind her, toward the sound of laughter inside. "You shouldn't be here right now." Her voice had that polite edge people use when they're embarrassed, not angry, just desperate to erase a mistake. I blinked, confused. "Lena, it's your birthday. I just wanted to—" She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Please, not now. They're all here. Evan's family. Mom. I told them you couldn't make it." Before I could answer, she pressed her hand against my arm, firm, almost trembling, and guided me backward. Then the door closed, and the lock clicked, sharp and final. That tiny sound tore through me more than any argument could have. It wasn't loud, but it carried 20 years of distance in a single second. I stood there, staring at the faint outline of her through the frosted glass. My reflection looked older than I felt, hair silver under the porch light, eyes that had seen too much of other people's pain, never expecting my own daughter to add to it. I took a long breath, tucked the envelope back into my coat pocket, and walked down the steps slowly, one hand gripping my phone. The air was freezing, but I felt strangely calm. I knew exactly what I was about to do next. The engine hummed softly, the dashboard lights casting a pale glow over my hands. I sat there for a long moment, not trusting myself to breathe too deeply. The house behind me still shimmered with light, music, laughter, the easy rhythm of people who believed the world was exactly as it should be. My world had just tilted a little, not enough to break, just enough to sting. I pulled the envelope from my coat pocket and looked at it again. The name Lena written in blue ink, careful and proud, the same way I used to write her name on permission slips when she was little, so her teacher would know she belonged to someone who cared. I pressed the paper flat on the steering wheel and whispered to no one, "Not anymore." The decision came easy, almost mechanical. I opened the banking app, scrolled to stop payment, and entered the check number I had memorized. My fingers didn't shake this time. The confirmation light blinked green, a small clean circle of control. Then I opened my messages. Go. That was all I sent. Caleb didn't need more than that. He'd been waiting weeks for my signal, compiling every document, every screenshot, every bank statement where my name had been used without my consent. We'd agreed on timing, the moment she crossed a line that couldn't be mistaken for anything but rejection. Tonight, she did. As the car idled, my breath fogged up the windshield. I drew a small circle in the condensation, the way I used to trace hearts for her on frosty mornings before school. My thumb paused halfway, then flattened the mark. The sound of my own exhale filled the car, steady, but tight. I wasn't crying. That surprised me. I thought I'd fall apart, but instead there was this strange, steady calm, like the air just before a storm, the kind of quiet that holds its breath before everything changes. I started the wipers, cleared the fog, and reversed out of the cul-de-sac slowly. The houses looked identical in the dark, neat porches, warm windows, and inside, families that worked the way families were supposed to. When I reached the end of the street, the traffic light turned red. I let the car idle again and looked at myself in the rearview mirror. The woman staring back was older. Yes, but not small. There was something settled in her expression, like a piece of iron finding its place after years of bending. The phone buzzed once. Caleb's reply, delivered. That single word echoed louder than the party laughter behind me. Somewhere in that house, the truth was already rippling outward, quiet but unstoppable. I turned left onto the main road, the tires crunching over the thin layer of frost. The night opened ahead, empty, clear, mine. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like anyone's mother. I felt like myself. The days that followed moved slower than the winter sun. Each morning, I brewed coffee I rarely finished, let the mug cool beside unpaid bills, and told myself not to check the newsfeed. Still, my fingers hovered above the phone, wondering what the fallout looked like behind that perfect porch. Caleb sent a short message on Tuesday. Noise died down, let it breathe. I did. Silence became my new habit, but silence is never empty. It carries echoes. One echo was the baby shower at the Maple Ridge Clubhouse 3 years ago. I had shown up late from an extra shift, hair still damp from the hospital's shower room. The tables were wrapped in silver cloth, the guests sipping from tall glasses. I carried a small box, inside, a yellow sweater I'd knitted between night rounds. When I placed it on the gift table, a woman I didn't know glanced at the tag and smiled too wide. "Oh, that's handmade," she said, like it was an apology. Lena didn't meet my eyes that day. She kept introducing me as Mom, she's a nurse, always busy. I remember nodding, pretending I didn't notice when she seated me at the far corner, near the restrooms. The second echo came the night Nora was born. I wasn't allowed inside the delivery room. Hospital policy, they said. But Judith Hale somehow got in. When they finally let me hold my granddaughter, Lena looked exhausted, fragile. I told her she was beautiful. She nodded but didn't answer. I didn't know that while I was buying flowers, she was already building another wall between us. And the last echo, sharpest of all, was the credit card bill that arrived 6 months later. My name, my address, charges I'd never made, flights, jewelry, a hotel in Chicago. When I called the bank, they asked if I wanted to dispute it. I said yes, but it took me a week to admit aloud that the handwriting on the application was hers. I stopped sleeping well after that. Nights became long stretches of thought, replaying the moments I could have said no, could have stopped her from slipping away. Maybe if I had drawn the line sooner, she wouldn't have learned to step on me to reach higher ground. By the 7th day after the party, the guilt had burned itself down to a small, solid ember. I could hold it without flinching. It didn't hurt anymore, it just reminded me I was still alive. I folded the last hospital uniform I owned into a donation box and whispered, "That's enough. Tomorrow, I would see Caleb again. There were things left to finish." Caleb arrived at the diner before I did. He always chose the corner booth, the one with a view of both the door and the parking lot. Old habits die hard for a private investigator. His coffee was already half gone when I slid into the seat across from him. He didn't waste time with small talk. He opened a manila folder and turned it toward me. Inside were printed screenshots, financial statements, and copies of emails. The stack looked harmless, but I felt my stomach tighten like I'd swallowed gravel. "She used your name to open 2 cards, he said quietly. "Total balance about $12,000. One's been paid down since last month, probably using her husband's account. The other, still active." I nodded, tracing a finger along the edge of the paper. The handwriting on the application line was undeniably mine, or rather, my imitation. Caleb flipped to another page. There's more. Texts between her and her mother-in-law. Not pretty. They talk about you like you're a liability, someone who might embarrass the family image. He paused, watching for my reaction. I didn't give him one. I just took a sip of my coffee. It had gone lukewarm and kept my eyes on the folder. I also found something else, he added. She's planning to apply for a business loan, using your credit score as collateral. If that happens, it'll bury you for good. That was when I felt the calm again. Not anger, not even sadness, just a cold, steady line of thought. We'll stop it, I said. He nodded. I've already drafted the affidavit for the FTC. You just need to sign, and your lawyer can handle the trust papers? Grant's waiting for my call. When he handed me a pen, my fingers didn't shake this time either. I signed the affidavit, date and initials neat and deliberate. Then I closed the folder and pushed it back across the table. Keep it, I said. If she ever questions what she did, you show her that. Caleb studied me for a moment, then gave a slow nod. You're not just protecting your name, Marta. You're reclaiming it. I managed a faint smile. That's the plan. Outside, the diner's neon sign flickered against the snow. I stood, pulled my coat tight, and thought about how truth can be heavier than guilt, but at least it keeps you warm. The next morning, the sky over Maple Ridge looked washed out, pale as an old bedsheet. I sat by the kitchen window with my checkbook open, the pen resting between my fingers. It had been years since I'd written a personal check that large, and yet my hand didn't hesitate. $15,000, every cent of the emergency fund I'd built since retiring. I wrote her name slowly, Lena Quinn Hart. The letters curled steady and sure, the same way I'd once signed permission slips and medical forms for her when she was little. Funny how the motions never change, only the meaning does. When I tore the check from the book, the sound was sharper than I expected. It sliced the air clean in two. I slid it into a plain white envelope and sealed it with my thumb, pressing down until it felt irreversible. Then I took out my phone and photographed the check, front, back, number, visible, and saved it to a hidden folder. The image felt like armor. I set the envelope on the counter beside a cooling cup of tea. The sunlight caught the edge of it, turning the paper translucent. For a moment, I imagined how it would look in her hands, how her eyes might soften for a heartbeat before hardening again. I wondered if she would see it as love or proof that she'd won. Maybe both. When the tea went cold, I slipped the envelope into my purse. Tomorrow was her birthday. The house would be full. The cameras out. The kind of night when appearances mattered more than truth. She'd want a mother who looked proud, not one who asked questions. I could do that much for her. One last time. But this time, I'd be the one deciding when the gift ended. The night air felt sharper than it should have for early spring. Streetlights glowed against the drizzle, turning the wet pavement into a mirror of gold and shadow. I parked at the far end of Lena's street, the same cul-de-sac where children used to ride bikes while she ran ahead, waving for me to watch. Now. The only sound was laughter spilling from the house at the corner, the one wrapped in white balloons and silver streamers. Her house. I smoothed my coat, checked the envelope in my purse, and walked up the driveway. Through the front windows, I could see a dining table dressed like a magazine spread, china plates, tall candles, the kind of elegance that made me feel like an intruder before I even reached the door. I rang the bell once. Lena opened it faster than I expected. Her smile froze halfway. The same half-second of panic you see in people who've been caught pretending. Behind her, voices floated from the dining room. "Judith, these flowers are stunning." Someone said, You must tell me you're florist. Lena leaned forward, whispering sharply, Mom, you shouldn't have come. I held out the envelope anyway. It's your birthday. Her eyes darted to the guests behind her. I could see Judith, perfect posture, glass of wine balanced in her hand, turning to look. Lena took a step outside, closing the door just enough to block the view. Please, not tonight, she said, voice trembling. They wouldn't understand. I looked past her shoulder at the laughter and silver cutlery gleaming under chandelier light. For a heartbeat, I thought I might beg her to let me stay. Instead, I smiled. You're right. They probably wouldn't. I slipped the envelope into her hand. It disappeared between her fingers like it had never existed. Then I turned, descended the porch steps, and walked back into the night. The wind carried faint music from inside, a piano piece I used to play while she did her homework. It followed me until I reached the car. I sat behind the wheel, opened my phone, and tapped a single word. Go. The screen glowed softly against the dark. Somewhere behind me, the truth began its slow descent into her perfect little party. I didn't need to see what happened inside to know the moment it started. The phone on the passenger seat buzzed once, twice, then stayed still. Caleb's system was timed perfectly, emails sent simultaneously to a small, curated circle, Lena's husband, her mother-in-law, her closest friend, and one contact from the bank's fraud department. Not revenge, just revelation. The neighborhood around me was still. The kind of quiet only suburbs manage, peace that's built on everyone pretending they're fine. Through the windshield, I watched the house. For a few seconds, nothing changed. Then I saw movement behind the sheer curtains. A man stood abruptly from the table. Another figure, Judith, leaned forward, face pale even through the frosted glass. I turned off the engine and listened. The sound came faintly through the night, the rising hum of confusion, the sharp pitch of someone's voice breaking through music, then silence again, the heavy kind that follows truth, landing where lies used to sit. Inside that silence, I imagined her, Lena, cheeks flushed, clutching the envelope, her world folding in on itself as the screens lit up one by one with my name and the evidence she thought I'd never find. She'd see the forged applications, the transfers, the messages calling me a burden she had to carry. All of it time-stamped, undeniable. I didn't feel triumph. I felt relief. The porch light flickered once. Someone must have opened the door. I shifted in my seat, but no one came out. I could have driven away right then, but something in me needed to stay until I saw the shadow of that door close again. Not for vengeance, just closure. When the light finally went dark, I took a deep breath and exhaled so long it left my chest hollow. I whispered, "That's enough," and it sounded less like anger, more like a prayer. The phone buzzed again. A new message from Caleb. Delivered. Seen. That was all I needed. I started the car, merging back onto the main road. Behind me, Maple Ridge grew smaller, the glittering houses blurring into one long streak of gold, the kind of beauty that only exists from a distance. For the first time in years, I didn't look back. 3 days later, the first call came from an unknown number. I let it ring out. The second came an hour later, then another after midnight. By the fourth, I saved the contact as do not answer. Caleb said the fallout had been fast. Evan had confronted her that night. He'd seen the screenshots, the forged signatures, the messages to Judith. The family's tidy little image shattered faster than anyone expected. There had been shouting, tears, denial, the usual stages of exposure. Then came the silence, the kind that follows when there's nothing left to argue about. When the bank called to verify the identity theft claim, I was calm. I faxed the affidavit, the police report, every page of proof. The woman on the line said, "You've done everything right, ma'am." For the first time in months, I believed her. Evan's lawyer reached out next. He wanted to discuss a settlement. No court, no headlines, just restitution. $25,000 wired directly to me, and an agreement that my name would never appear in any legal filing. I accepted, not out of greed, but because closure sometimes needs a number to feel real. That weekend, a handwritten envelope appeared in my mailbox. My daughter's handwriting, smaller now, careful. I stood at the counter for a long time before opening it. The first line read, "I know you'll never forgive me, but I need you to know I understand now." She wrote about shame, about Judith's expectations, about trying to become someone who deserved that last name. She said the lies started small, tiny excuses that grew teeth, and by the time she realized what she'd become, she didn't know how to stop. I read it twice, then folded it neatly and set it in the drawer beside my checkbook. I didn't write back. Not because I hated her, but because I wanted her words to sit there, unfinished. Some lessons are meant to echo. That night, I made chamomile tea and stood by the window, watching the porch light flicker across the empty street. The house was silent, but for once, it didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. Tomorrow, I told myself, I'd start something new. Morning arrived quietly, the kind of stillness that made you notice the smallest sounds, the groan of wood under the porch, the faint whistle of wind slipping through the screens. The world was just waking, and so was I. I brought my tea outside, the same chipped mug I'd used for years. The porch had always been my refuge, a place for night shifts, leftovers, and forgotten thoughts. But now it felt like something else, something earned. The frost on the railing sparkled, catching the first light. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel the weight of waiting. 2 months had passed since that night. Maple Ridge had long moved on. Gossip here was seasonal, like the weather. But for me, the air felt cleaner. I had space in my head again, quiet, uncluttered, peaceful. My name was clear, my credit restored, and the bank manager had called last week to apologize personally. I didn't gloat. I just thanked her and hung up. Some victories don't need celebration. They just need acknowledgement. I'd started volunteering at the Children's Hospital every Thursday. The first day I walked back into that sterile brightness. I could barely breathe. Then a small hand reached up from the waiting room, holding out a crayon, blue and worn down to its paper. "You color too," the little girl said. And just like that, I remembered who I was before I became someone's mother, someone's mistake, someone's secret. At night, I joined a small book club at the public library. The women there spoke softly but laughed loudly, unashamed. One of them, Ruth, gave me a copy of The Housekeeper and the Professor. She said it was about memory and forgiveness. She was right. I finished it in 2 nights and left it open on my nightstand, pages curling from the steam of my tea. Sometimes, when the sun sets and the light fades pink across the porch, I still think about Lena, not with anger anymore, not even sorrow, just with a quiet understanding that we are both products of our choices. I hope she's healing in her own way. I hope she keeps that letter she wrote, reads it when the house grows too silent. The checkbook and her letter rest in the drawer beside my bed. I don't open it often. Knowing it's there is enough, a reminder that love, even when bruised, doesn't vanish. It just changes shape. A robin landed on the railing then, tilting its head at me like it had something to say. "You're early," I whispered. It chirped once, then flew into the pale sky. I sat back, the mug warm in my palms, the world finally still. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for forgiveness. I already had it. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.